Hello everyone. Welcome one more time to the AWS Pulse. You already know me, you already know John. We're here every other week. You've seen us all the time, so I'll skip us and go straight to our illustrious uh, guest for today, which is Dominic Delmolino. Dominic is a vice president of field technology here at AWS on the public sector. So that should speak for itself. And obviously, the topic for today, we're talking a lot about public sector. Dominic, it is your first time on the Pulse. It's the fifth time for me and John. But on the Pulse, we always start with our guest journey. So I'll ask you this. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You've had this remarkable progression all the way from customer through helping serve the public sector here at AWS. Tell us about your journey. How did you get here?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here. 35 years in industry, so I've seen it all, I think sometimes, although I continue to be surprised and amazed by, some of the new things that we're seeing appear today and, what we saw appear even at reInvent, last week before. My journey, at least in public sector, really kicked off when I was doing work in the private sector. And I was doing consulting work at some large commercial companies. And many times I would get called in as part of a SWAT team to fix a problem, diagnose an issue, or find out why a system wasn't working the way that the customer or partner needed it to be. And as I worked in the private sector, I was like, oh my gosh, I would get to some place and I'd be like, wow, that system's a real mess. And I'm not sure these folks will be able to keep it running after I've left. I'm not going to bank with that bank or buy sporting goods from that store or do any of that work with that customer. I'll find another company who seems to maybe be up to speed on their IT capabilities. And then when I moved into the public sector world, I realized, I don't have options there. Like if I'm working and I need my driver's license, I can't, arbitrate which driver's license agency I get to go to. There's one I have to use, and not only me, but my neighbors, my family, my colleagues have to use. And so, that began my journey in public sector and realizing the mission that so many public sector organizations have, serving citizens, students, patients, donors and beneficiaries of nonprofits, all of these public sector industries of government, education, healthcare, nonprofit that many of us are interacting with every day. In some cases, we don't have a lot of options. And so we really need to bring the best of technology to those organizations. And it's a mission, it's a calling for many people who do public sector IT. And it was the kind of that discovery moment for me of, wow, if everyone has to use these systems, why can't we make them the best they can be? Why don't they get to benefit from the bleeding edge technology, all the lessons we've learned in places where it's successful? Let's really bring that and apply that to these institutions that have to serve so many constituencies. They don't get to choose also who they serve, right? A public sector organization doesn't get to say, well, we're not gonna talk to these kinds of people. This is our market segment. This is our target demographic. In many cases, they serve the public. And so, that need to be accessible, to be highly performant, easy to use, all of those things that you'd want, the best technology experience to be, is something where we should expect from public sector. And when you see public sector officials who really understand that, who think mobile first or think accessibility or think convenience, think transparency, you really want to get behind them and work with them. And it's a really gratifying thing to be able to see how your neighbors, your friends, your family benefit from that work. So that's the journey I've been on, and that's where I am today. And I continue to be excited and energized by not only the opportunity in the United States, but around the world to see how, a company like AWS has an ability to have that kind of impact at scale for so many people. It's just, to me, it's a great thing to wake up to every day.
Tom, that's really noble. That mission-driven organizations and being able to go after taking the common good, and why not make it good, right? Why can't we have something good as the common good?
Yeah,
That's amazing. So it's public sector and the nonprofit, not-for-profit. It's not just so your customer set is. I think you said something. Whenever we're here in the States, we tend to think public sector, and immediately our mind goes to government agencies that are here inside of our borders, but it's worldwide, right? So you're affecting governments, nonprofits, not-for-profits, everywhere.
Yeah. I remember a statistic the other day. I think it's over 70% of healthcare is delivered either by a government institution worldwide or a nonprofit institution worldwide. It's over 70%. And so even when you say healthcare, you can say, well, that is a public good in many cases too. And in the U.S., maybe we have so many different options: private care, not-profit care, state care. But it's amazing just there. Education similarly is often a government kind of public good that's provided to students so they can achieve more and really learn and do more. And so it's a broad set of things, and that's why I usually say the word public sector. I don't just say government. That's just one element of the organizations that I've had a chance to work with.
Just one piece of it. Yeah. So Dominic, on to the next piece here. Those public sector customers really do fascinate me because there are a lot of needs that they have. I had the privilege of working at a private company that served the public sector for 18 years. It was a joy to see the people that actually put their heart and their bodies on the line to actually make sure that we're okay day to day. And so I really enjoyed seeing the scale that some of these systems get to. So there may be schools that you're helping out. It might be a super collider, right?
Yeah.
But these differences in these groups are just vast. And so even kind of trying to wrap my head around what you and your organization, your team does, it's mind-boggling. So at AWS, we tend to work backwards. Start with the customer first. For all those out there, means we're going to go see what the customer wants and then work backwards from that and try to get to what they need. So in looking at what AWS has built and what all of those different kind of customers needed that your team serves, what did they need and what did we build and why? Like what's out there that's different for them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right. We try to work backwards from what our customers and partners tell us they need. And in the public sector case, we try to think even to the next step, which is who are the customers that they serve. So you talk about citizens, you talk about students, you talk about patients, you talk about beneficiaries, you talk about donors, you talk about the so-called end user of these services. And a lot of what the IT professionals in these organizations are looking for is, are we able to measure the impact we have with our systems? Can we quickly respond to an emergent need, right? And so, we all lived through a crazy pandemic period where organizations had to quickly stand up, vaccine registration sites and call centers and on demand within days or weeks, an emergency situation. And there's no way they could have done that with traditional hardware procurement and software construction. And so, cloud technology was the way they were able to respond quickly to the needs of the public and the needs of the people they were serving. Remote learning. Oh my gosh, how are we going to enable that? How are we going to enable an ability to keep track of who's registered to get a vaccine? Are they in the right early access population because we have limited supplies? And how do we do that kind of stuff quickly and efficiently and effectively and don't make mistakes? And that kind of way we responded as an organization, and many of the others in this industry did. But making sure that we were there in the boat with them, rowing in the same direction, and learning about the needs there, which is around privacy and security and reliability and high performance, sure. But the ability to really make sure that, hey, this is super critical information that should be protected. And so can we demonstrate to them that we will and protect it? How we do that, how we secure data, how we give them tools to secure data, how we give them tools to maintain transparency around what actions are being taken and record that and log that in a scalable way, how to audit the transactions that are occurring to potentially guard against fraud when it occurs. So all of those things really get into these interesting needs. Oftentimes I get asked, well, your customers don't care about revenue. And I'm like, revenue is not the measure of success. Impact is the measure of success, and how we successfully execute the mission in an efficient, effective, secure, and reliable way, in a way that, when it's subject to investigation, audit, and inspection, it's, wow, we wish every system was this capable and this transparent and this clear and this auditable and this reliable and this secure. And there's so many of those dimensions that are really the way the customer values what we deliver for them, and their end user values too. And so, there were some systems, I think we had the US Postal Service on stage at the DC Public Sector Summit, and they talked about the work they did at the Postal Service to enable free delivery of, COVID test kits that was provided by the US administration. And when you went online and you saw customer reaction, end user reaction to that website, there were folks saying, I can't believe this is a government website. It's simple, it's easy to use, it's fast, it works for me. There's not a lot of complications to it, and it just worked. And that was gratifying to see, because that's what we want. We want technology to not be the thing people remember, but the service they get when we enable the capability and we partner with those IT organizations, with those contractors, those partners, to make it happen. And so when you say, what do they need? It really is that they're in the public arena every day. And so no one's shy about criticizing the level of government service they get, or something like that. And so it's important that we make sure that the services that we provide underneath that are reliable and secure and safe.
Yeah, and Dom, the scale of it, the scale is always the thing that I would bring back whenever I was doing this work, and it's kind of mind-boggling. You're right. You usually just have one choice. This is the agency that I need to deal with. This is the system that they've put in place, and there's just the one of them. That sort of the scale need really is something different, because often with companies, there are multiple of them serving a market or a market subsegment, and nobody's got everything covered. But whenever it comes to the public sector, there's often just like one of them that does that thing. So being able to scale to hundreds of millions of things to process at a very punctuated period in time, they get to some of the problems. Interestingly, they have to cross the Rubicon first, right? So those are some of the other problems of need that actually those government agencies, those public sector organizations, they have to solve the problem before we in the private sector have to cross that river. So we've got one question, Raphael, if you can bring it up. And here, go ahead, Raphael.
I was going to ask about the GovCloud, right, and what we build for customers, and then somebody on the audience asked it too, so we can, I guess, address both of them together. But I guess that to combine both questions, what are the top challenges we, had to solve on, and why did we went, I guess, with the direction of like GovCloud and a separate cloud for government, and what are your thoughts even on the future of that, if any?
Yeah, early on when we started engaging with the US government to provide computing that could support government missions, we quickly learned that there were some requirements and things that the government wanted to be able to see about how we operated the cloud in a way that helped them feel like they were getting the security that they needed to be able to demonstrate to the public in particular. And a lot of these things are codified in regulation. And to be honest, many of them are a little bit out of date because they assume a certain way of operating. So we had to kind of work through demonstrating many of that, and were lessons for us too. Like we had to learn how to show that all of the systems were only accessed by U.S. persons, for example, as a requirement to provide computing services to the U.S. government. And so how do we build an environment where we can demonstrate that? And so early on, we did a lot of that through kind of air gapping and setting up a separate set of servers on a separate set of facilities to ensure that we could meet that requirement. And I think in many ways, we learned a lot about what those requirements were. We met them in the easiest and quickest way we could at the time. And as we've learned together about what those requirements mean, what they're trying to achieve with them, we're able to bring those concepts into our commercially available regions. And we see more and more government agencies now going through the process of we work backwards from what they're trying to see, and we explain to them how we're able to help them achieve those security, privacy, and other regulatory requirements via our commercial controls, with third-party attestation around the Nitro system, for example, that we've achieved, that talk about the limitations of operator access, the continuing work we're doing to limit, audit, and log any operator access to the servers and systems that the customer is relying upon to do their work. And these are things we've learned by building these kind of specialized regions. And as we've done so, we've gotten to the point now with customers around the world where if they start with that, I want a private set of physical infrastructure, to, hey, you know what? We have several sets of things that we believe your commercial infrastructure can accommodate and meet. And it's even today's case today, our commercial regions are certified for moderate and low security workloads, what's known as the FISMA moderate or FedRAMP moderate workloads in the commercial regions. And so GovCloud is for those kinds of things that still may need a few extra things, but it continues to be less necessary than it used to be to build a region like that. So it doesn't seem like that long ago, but in cloud time, 10 years ago is an amazing amount of time. And so if you think about it, what we were able to do maybe 10 years ago versus what we can do today and what we've learned from that work we did back then allows us to provide even more secure capabilities in our commercial regions. And it continues to improve and get better there as well.
So you're saying what we built for them, we went out and built this special cloud, a Gov cloud set aside, but that is not the only thing we built. In the commercial side of the cloud, not the Gov cloud, that cloud also works for these government workloads often. If they only need FISMA or FedRAMP moderate or low,
yeah,
then they could go run that workload out there in commercial cloud and still be able to meet their regulations.
Yeah, and then if you talk to many governments, and I've talked to governments who are attempting to build their kind of version of FISMA low, medium, and high, and low, moderate, high, and then describe maybe the percentage of government workloads that meet each of those criteria. And it's fascinating because I'll say to them, 80% of your workloads will probably be moderate and low. And that's interesting to them because they're like, well, we thought it would only be like 20%. I'm like, no, it's actually probably the vast majority. Now, to be fair, your high workloads, your critical workloads, those often are the biggest systems, the most impactful, have high security requirements. The budgetary amount might be flipped, right? Where you spend a lot of time and effort really securing those important systems. So it's not to imply that just because it's 20%, it's not important, but there's a large amount of way to get started with vast numbers of systems where you can cut your teeth, learn what's possible, demonstrate what's secure, build your capabilities so that when you get to those high critical workloads, you're ready to say, well, you know what, we can achieve many of these things in the commercial regions with the right approach to securing our data, encrypting our data, leveraging Nitro enclaves, leveraging the tools we make available to them to secure and demonstrate security of those workloads that get them to be confident. And you get there through experience. And I think we try to help customers move along that experience journey as fast as they are able to do so, and as their contractors are able to do so. And so it's a learning journey for many of our customers. And so we found that to be effective. And around the world, we're seeing a lot of uptake in governments that rely on our commercial infrastructure to provide the secure services they need.
The word secure means a lot to me, and I'm sure it does to our public sector customers as well. I remember these conversations very clearly in the early 2000s when cloud was just starting out. Oh, how can it be secure? And now it's flipped. It's to where they're having the conversation. I need to go to the cloud because it's more secure there. This is tried, true, tested, battle hardened for all of these kinds of workloads. And if I go try to build it myself, how do I stand the test of time against an advanced persistent threat, or against, something that is going to be bigger than me trying to come knock at the door.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is another part of what we built for customers too, right?
Yeah, well, there's a great story about the amount of effort, time, investment we make in security in and of itself, not just the services we offer, but the work we do to secure our own infrastructure and the investment we make in it and the scale and volume of and variety of threats we have seen and have been able to prevent. It's something that an individual organization is not going to be able to do on their own. They're not going to be able to afford to do that kind of investment in the security protections and investments that we do and have the security culture that we have. And customers get to benefit from that. And so it's another thing I like to help customers understand is you saw it if you watched Matt's reInvent keynote and you saw that 3 developer team and somebody said, "Hey, did you run the pen test?" And the guy looks over and goes, "I don't have time to run a pen test."
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yeah. So it tells you that the investment we make in security of our basic infrastructure, not even like our specialized infrastructure, is light years beyond what an organization can do on their own, and customers get to benefit from that.
And of course, there's still the shared responsibility model. So everything that needs to be secured by customers is still true. It's just that there's a baseline that is taken care of because you're running with us.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's something I want to dive into here. Some of these customers, the democratization of data. There is, kind of this common good we were talking about before with some of these public entities. And there's so many petabytes of public data that is useful for, we talked about healthcare. We talked about data exchange. Maybe there's some of the data that we talked about for space. This is some of the data that are available out on AWS's Open Data program that was recently launched and spoken about on the AWS blogs. So what is one of the most surprising or impactful use cases you've seen from this kind of technology being offered to our customers?
Yeah, I think the one I find most interesting, just as a geek sometimes, is the Landsat data. So this is the satellites who take pictures of the Earth at different resolutions and different levels during different parts of the season, during different parts of the way the Earth's tilted, right? So, and what organizations, private sector organizations, are able to do with that data. In Texas, for example, they've been using it to understand erosion patterns from the Gulf. To see, where's erosion occurring and what techniques are effective at preventing, erosion of the coastline. There's a company in Japan, I think it's called Dega, and what they've been doing is they've been evaluating Landsat and agricultural imagery data from Africa, so they can teach African farmers about sustainable farming practices, and they combine that Landsat data with Gen AI and an LLM to be able to basically explain, what sustainable farming practice works best in a certain area, in a certain climate, and a certain topo distribution, right, and getting right down to it. And so, to me, that publicly available, Earth's data is just amazing, and it's not just for interest, but for benefit, and not only for benefit.
Lives, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking about agriculture in a place that's got a very specific microclimate, and being able to take that data and make an impact in people's lives, that's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I'll open a can of worms here. So typically on this show, sometimes we like to get into at least one controversial topic, and so I'll have one for you. So, if we go back a few years, right, like due to the, nationwide protests on George Floyd's death, Amazon put a 1-year moratorium of public use of recognition, right, facial recognition software, due to concerns on bias and everything. And then the company has since extended this indefinitely, preventing law enforcement from using this type of technology, while still allowing, I guess, some specific use cases for like finding human traffic victims and things like that. Amazon has extended until further notice. I guess this is all just a backstage for my question. What I wanted to ask is, like, how do you think we should balance the potential benefits of AI, right? Like now AI is the top of everyone's mind, for legitimate like use cases, while also addressing, civil liberties concerns.
Yeah, it's we've learned a lot about ethical use of AI, responsible use of AI, and how that works. And you've seen a lot more organizations think about, what are the elements of building responsible AI? How do we do things like have a service card that talks about, what a model is has been looked at, what it's been evaluated against. And at AWS, we've started to codify these things into our core dimensions of responsible AI. And there's 8 dimensions of this, around fairness, around explainability, around privacy and security, around safety, around controllability or repeatability, around veracity and robustness, our system outputs correct. Governance, what's the approach to supervising AI as it's used in a certain use case, and then transparency about allowing people to make decisions about when an AI, how it comes to a decision, right? And so we've learned a lot. Early AI was very you might say coin flippy, right? Yes or no, this bucket or that bucket. Nowadays it's much more nuanced. And because of that, we've evolved and understood at the time, perhaps, using that kind of binary decision-making process isn't the right approach. And early AI, as embodied by tools like recognition, we saw organizations perhaps misusing that in a way of like, yes or no kind of decision-making. And that's not really the right approach. And so we've said, let's put a hold on use in that case and help people understand these dimensions of ethical AI usage and help them explore what it means to use AI responsibly. I know when I talk to customers about how and where they're going to deploy AI, I actually say, like, is your legal team in the room here? Let's make sure we are reviewing some of the legal ramifications of leveraging AI in this capacity and explore, where we should and shouldn't do things that might sound like a great idea, but when you really dig into it, it's not the most ethical or responsible use. And so that's why we have these core dimensions. It's why we've put some limitations on usage like you've referred to. And it really is helping customers and partners by challenging them to demonstrate that they understand what it means to have ethical and responsible AI, giving them the tools to implement their interpretation of those things, because those differ around the world. And so, it's why we provide guardrails. It's why we provide our service cards. It's why we help customers really understand what they're getting into in a way that shares information and helps them make the right best decision, and in an auditable and transparent way, because they're usually going to get asked about those things. And so I think at the early days of AI, it's so funny to refer to like legacy AI at this point, but in some ways that's what we had, and now there's much more nuance to it and a better understanding that allow us to engage with legislative bodies and regulatory officials to help them understand, when is it the right way, time, place, and way to use AI for these kinds of activities. And so when it gets to, impact on human lives, that's where the inspection level goes way up, right? And it really is about making sure that we're, there's oversight, there's transparency, there's the right use in place. And I think we've come to a really good balance of that with our core dimensions of responsible AI. And you can find that. You can go to Amazon.com AI responsible-AI, and you can see all of those core dimensions that I've mentioned here.
A bit of a follow-up softball then. So do we recommend that customers implement this as part of their own machinery for, assessing their own AI that they create, implement? How far does that responsible AI framework work? Is it just for us? Does it work for the customers? Does it work for the customers of the customers? What's our recommendation whenever it comes to that?
Yeah, so first of all, there are things we do internally as well around testing models, recording what data was used to test a model, and things like that. So we hold ourselves accountable, number one. Number two is, similar in the shared responsibility world, we provide our customers with tools and information so that they can evaluate how they want to use AI and these tools and guardrails to meet their regulatory requirements. And if they don't have those regulatory requirements, I generally stop them right there and say, you need to start developing that framework. In a lot of cases, they have what I call prior art here. They may have guidelines for how their individuals interact with the public, for example. So if you have a call center agent, and that call center agent starts saying things that are against policy, you have a way to check that. You have a way to discipline that. You have a way to correct that. You have a way to intercept it. And similar with AI, you should treat it the same way, and understanding that it could have greater impact even. And so, I basically try to start them from the, how do you guide the ethics of the individuals in your organization, and can we use that as a framework to build out the ethical treatment of how you use AI in your organization. And it's important work. And it's not that hard because there's a fair amount of prior art that can be leveraged here. And we provide a ton of tools that help people implement, audit, oversee, guide, intercept, and manage their use of AI. And so we basically say, listen, until you think about how you're going to do that, and if you come to us with how you want to implement these guardrails, we have an answer and a solution that'll help you do that, in addition to the amazing power that you can achieve using the technology.
So the responsibility is something that we had to cross, and we provide frameworks and tools to be able to help customers with their end of the responsibility as well.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So you spoke about AI, and I know that we're talking about a big shift. So reInvent happened last week at time of recording, and we've got this groundswell of all the news, all the announcements. I know I'm using a superlative, but it felt that way. It wasn't quite everything, but AI was everywhere. And we're seeing the cloud change. We're seeing the cloud change because of the changes in artificial intelligence, specifically the first implementation with this brand new generation of generative AI, and now all of the different primitives that have come to light with model, context protocol, MCP servers, agent-to-agent communication, LLMs, being able to do so many new fantastic things with these non-deterministic systems that we've got brand new building blocks. In addition, we've got brand new tools that we're going to learn how to use. This is all stuff that people were not trained on in school, that are brand new, that are being given to us on a regular basis. So we are pretty bullish on the show about the future of AI and its prospects. And looking ahead, public sector organizations are no different. They're also looking at the prospect of what happens, what changes their organization, what changes how they serve folks whenever they begin to apply AI to task. And so as they begin to explore this in the horizon of the next 2-3 years, those systems that can autonomously plan or execute or create those kinds of multi-step agentic behaviors become quite real and quite useful, especially in this space. So given the way that we think about this internally at AWS, what are some of the conversations you've been having with your customers, and how should they begin positioning themselves for this new wave of AI that it is coming to them? Because you do talk about legacy AI, and I agree with you totally wholeheartedly. That's the wave that we had before. This new wave is something different.
Yeah.
So what are those conversations that happen whenever you're going to talk to these orgs?
Well, the first thing I try to tell them is, I kind of think about I've coined a phrase. It probably hasn't taken off. I call it Web 4. So we all remember Web 3. I talk to customers now about Web 4. And so what's Web 4? Well, I think there was this phase where, everything's on the web, right? Everybody's got to have a website and a portal to their services that they provide, right? So if you're a government agency, you're an educational institution, you're a healthcare organization, how are you making your services available online, digitally available, right? Matter of fact, the the UN has a measure of digital government or US or country digital capability, right? And it's one of them is, are your services available online? Well, that might have been great in the 80s and maybe even the early 90s. And then it became, well, if you go today, right, everybody accesses internet services and capabilities through their phone. The bulk of websites are accessed via a mobile browser or a mobile device. And so that was the wave, right? Mobile, everything needs to be mobile friendly. So this is where you got your kind of progressive web apps and your dynamic sizing of websites, that single page web app that can resize no matter what the tablet or phone device is. So it can be accessible via phone. So the next wave, I think, is that's great. And that assumes that, you're the thing you're talking to is a person who wants to interact with your service. In the future, you're likely to you have to have a way for your services to be agentically accessible. And so your websites need to be agent friendly. So today we do a lot of work on UX and UI. What does the user interface look like? What's the user experience? I'm guiding my customers to think about what is the agent interface to your service and what is the agent experience like? Is it efficient? Is it effective? Can the agent that you expose interact with an incoming agent in an effective and efficient way? And there's fun clips out there if you see two agents actually renegotiate their communication protocol on the fly because they're like, hey, you're an agent, I'm an agent. We don't need to pass JSON back and forth. We can binary encode stuff to it's real efficient, right? And so, then you got to remind the agents, hey, you need to audit what you're doing. You need to log it. So you can't just do that, right? And so, there's a whole bunch of fun work, I think, that's going to be done to make your services agent friendly. Because we're going to have this thing where every individual is going to have their own cadre of agents to do the activities they need done, like go schedule me my oil change and coordinate sending my medical data from this organization to that organization, and get this permit from this organization, but get the data needed to apply for their permit and get it together and send it. That kind of personal agent army is going to interact on the other side with a set of public service agents that access systems that can provide records and transactional verification of what's being done. So I think that to me is kind of the exciting future that's out there. And it's where I guide people toward, which is think about how you're leveraging agents to modernize your systems, right? To have a modern experience. And then you can start to think about what's possible that you could do with agents that you couldn't do today. But you can't just I don't want to have another big bag of legacy systems that we're going to have to deal with. It's really, how do you keep your systems up to date for this new world of agentic AI?
I think that pushes further out. You're right, Dom. So thinking about systems for humans, we have 300 plus AWS services, right?
Yeah.
And so the way that we think about, we've built all of these things for the technologists and the technology that they needed to interface with. There's a new wave that we're going to need to make sure that we're thinking about is what happens when you're making systems for systems, right?
Yeah.
So making systems for this set of agentic futures that we're going to face. So the other thing on those agencies is how do those agencies position themselves? What are they needing to really think through as this wave comes across them? And there were several things. You're right. I mean, we had to go face the mobile change and be able to provide all these brand new user interfaces, being able to work on it was low speed networking back then too. So all of those web applications that were great on computer and that brought all these rich data across were not quite so great whenever we needed to scroll through our phones. This is going to change some pieces as well. So where agents fit in, where do some of these brand new tools and capabilities actually work in these systems? So when you're having those sorts of conversations, what do the agencies bring to your attention?
Yeah, so I remind many of these agencies, especially in the government, you'll hear the term system of record.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so
master data management and system of record. Yep.
Yeah, I try not to use the master data management thing because it's kind of then you start hearing MDM software and oh no, I get twitchy when I remember those things.
It's the good old days. Yeah, Battlestar, good old days. Yeah.
But I'll give you a story on this one because systems of record are important. Like who decides what is the verifiable truth of a set of facts that's important. And we live in a world where that can be hard. There are lots of versions of stories out there on things. And so, the systems of record are important. I remember working with a set of customers, and this was inside the government, and we were building a system, and they're like, Dom, you need to build our database of US addresses because we have to send stuff to people. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, why? I work for this 3-letter agency. Why am I maintaining a database of US addresses? Doesn't the Postal Service have that, right? And I said, nowadays, like on the internet, every startup calls some API to validate a US address. Like they don't maintain their own database of US addresses, right? And they're like, no. The old system we used to get a DVD or CD from the Postal Service every month, and we would upload it into a database and we would use it. And I said, oh my gosh, that is just—
I've built that application, man. I've built that exact application in my past.
Yeah. And so I remember telling them, I said, listen, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, you're under contract. You have to build that. And I said, listen, it's going to take me time. It's going to take effort. I may make some mistakes. And why don't we just call the Postal Service and see if we can use their API? And they're like, well, they only make that available to commercial entities. And I was like, can we ask them? Like, because they're the system of record. They're the ground truth of who lives at an address and what the address is and what the apartment numbers are and how many units are in a building and things like that. Like, they're the system of record, and their value becomes making that data available in ways that can be leveraged for really valuable use. And I've seen agencies start to do this. NOAA does this a little bit too. This is the National Oceanographic an institute, right, where they have the weather data. And so how do you provide systems of record, verifiable facts that are easily accessible and leverageable, and that can be integrated? Because I think even as we see agentic capabilities exposed within our own companies, everybody has information silos in their own companies. Nowadays, a big value prop is, hey, I need to integrate data from that system with this system to get this result. The creativity comes from here. The agent understands where the system of record data is, knows how to query it, and what services are available to evaluate that data and search for that data and alter and modify that data for the format you want. And so that's the place I start leading them to. It's not necessarily your business process encoded anymore, because that may need to be flexible. It needs to be guided by regulation and guided through a mechanism that's auditable and transparentable and recordable, things like that. But the real value is you're the source of truth for the data and how we're allowed to use it. And that needs to be something super important and transparent. So that's where I help people work toward, because again, we're getting to a world where you're going to quickly state your requirement, and the agent will on the fly build the software or the processing necessary to satisfy your requirement, but it can't create the data from whole cloth. It needs to go get the actual real data. And so I think this idea that knowledge is encoded in software is good. I'm biased. I'm an old data guy from years ago. I love data. So I think, that you're going to start seeing data comparisons too. Like, well, wait, this organization says it has the truth data, and that organization, it says it has the truth data. Where's the discrepancy? How do we find it? How do we resolve it? So I really am a data person. And so this gets back to some of our early work with customers on data foundations and data quality and data sources. And do you know where your data is, and how are you using it? What are you using it for? And do you have multiple sources of data, and how are you guiding and governing that? And so, it can get ugly quick when you get into big data governance discussions, but if you do it right, I think you really unlock a lot of capabilities with AI.
Dom, you talked about that vision for the agentic future that you're having conversations with these organizations. And second, you talked about rethinking systems integration. So those large systems integrators and the SI, that's a totally different equation. You just went through like a really great example with, systems of record for that. The other piece, though, I want to ask about is with AI and the generative AI shift in public sector spaces, the people and their roles, and rethinking how to give folks extra tools, extra capabilities, extra powers as they go in and do their work. Because often a lot of the work that these agencies do, these organizations do, is there's a lot of unsung public heroes, public sector heroes that are just going to work on a day-to-day basis, doing that very difficult and thankless job, but they've got all of this responsibility of the mission of the organization riding on their backs. So what are the conversations about augmenting those people to give them a better, more human experience, and also the people that they serve?
Yeah, the big challenge, of course, is a lot of times when you're looking at a regulation that responds to a situation, there are many, many, many exceptions and corner cases. And if it's a Sunday, and if it's the person's coming from this part of the world, and it's this time of day, and there's so many combinations. And back in the day, there was attempts to build those into like rule-based systems, some really older systems as well. And honestly, a lot of the work that I see public officials try to do is help someone navigate that. They have a need, they have something they got to get done, and it's super difficult to, is it this, is it that, is it this, is it that? And if you try to do, the entire decision tree, you'll be there for an hour trying to figure out what you're supposed to do in a situation. You don't have that kind of time. You can't do it quickly enough to handle demand. And so when I'm seeing real work being done, there's a guy at Customs and Border, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, who works on their what they call Customs and Border Protection Experience, or CBPX, and he's really talking about making it returning time to the folks who have to do the work, and so that they can do their job more quickly, more efficiently, more effectively, and quickly make and pass through things that can go through and stop things that need to be stopped, but do that in a much more quickly and efficient way, help with AI helping work through like the decision trees that they need to, presenting the different cases and how they apply. And so I really like to see that thought process on how do we make the job easier for the individual, to help them understand what they could do, what they can't do, what they should ask about, how they should apply it. And it really makes the experience for the end user who has to interact with that service as well. And so I see a lot of work around giving time back to the person, if you will.
Yeah, Dom, I just am a geek for some of the things that come out of our public agencies. That you can see, I got the Saturn V right over here. So
yeah.
These sorts of things are really some of the same. So from Hubble and all of the data that came back from it, all the way to James Webb and the kind of information that's coming back from that, I really do believe that some of these things that we help be just a small part of, that these governments really have as their mission that they need to go out and provide, really breaking into new frontiers and establishing a new set of knowledge for that next generation, is just one of the most fascinating things that I get to spend my free time on, and just browse some of those beautiful pictures of space and thinking about how deep and vast the amount of knowledge is that we could go pursue. So from fusion reactors to everything that we go research in energy and healthcare, what are some of the coolest things you've seen people use the AWS cloud for in your service?
Yeah, the most recent one I saw that I was really impressed with is a startup in South Korea that does work with MRI images. So you mentioned kind of these beautiful images, right, of space and a new frontier. It's amazing to me in the healthcare realm, in some ways, how little we know about how the human body works, and the vast amount of data that your body produces, every day, and genomic analysis, and some of the amazing work that's being done in genetics and work there. But this company in South Korea realized that there was an opportunity with how MRI machines have evolved over the years. And in many cases, many locations, they're using maybe first generation MRI machines. And if you've ever had an MRI done, and I've had the unfortunate opportunity to have many done, you sit in that tube for a while sometimes while it scans very slowly and scans again to make sure it doesn't miss anything, and then scans a third time to get it.
Lots of time to contemplate your life choices in the
tube.
Yeah, cancer survivor on this side. So yeah, definitely respect all the people working in healthcare and what they do with those machines.
So if you think about it, one challenge there is, if you have a first generation MRI machine and it takes an hour to scan somebody at the level of detail required to give the doctor and patient the information they need, if I got one machine and it takes an hour to do a patient, I can do 8 patients a day. And I may have a demand of larger than that. I really could benefit more people from getting them the right imagery they need. And that time is money too. So now I've got to have a technician supervising the activity. And so, if there's a way to enhance that imagery, help the machine, hey, you already saw that, you can jump over that and get here. Now, how do you make that hour now 30 minutes or 15 minutes? And what they've done is they've written software and a module that you can basically hook up to these first generation, second generation machines and make those machines twice as productive or 3 times as productive. And now all of a sudden you can go around the world where, countries are maybe haven't had a chance to purchase or can't afford the latest gen, but are working with some older gen. And now suddenly you've improved the capability of that portion of the healthcare system by 100%. And it's a small thing, and this is all they do is focus on, enhancing MRI image quality with these devices and machines. But imagine the impact they're having, and on something
saving lives, absolutely.
It's making it more accessible for more people and getting higher quality medical information. And just, I think like you said, with the frontiers, the frontier of medical science that we're able to help enable is really, really gratifying and fascinating. We're doing the same in climate. We're doing the same in space. We're doing the same in, just genetics, and just the ability to get that data, process that data, investigate that data, leverage that data for human benefit is really powerful. And it's fun to be associated with that kind of work.
I'll say one thing. Like I think it's fascinating to me when I hear this conversation goes, like, in how many types of industries and topics the impact is. We think public sector is one, like there's fintech, there's healthcare, there's and then there's public sector. But in reality, public sector seems to be all of the above, right? Like in a different spectrum with a much larger impact radius. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I think other than manufacturing, and even there you could probably find someplace, the public sector has just about every other kind of industry element, like logistics and financial management and data processing requirements. And it's amazing all of the different things that obviously regulations have to understand so they can regulate effectively. But it's one reason why I like the work, is because I get a chance to make the world a better place for, my neighbors, my family, my friends, my fellow citizens. You can say the greater good, but to me, it's a lot important about, the community I live in, I interact with, that I'm a part of, right? And I tell my people all the time, the folks you pass on the street are our customers. You don't know it, but they all are. And your kid's soccer coach, right? Your partner's bridge buddy, right? Any of these people that you kind of interact with, they're our customers. And so being able to stand up tall and say, we're giving you the best technology we can, making it available for ways to make your life better and easier and healthier and safer. That's a fun place to be.
Yeah, we're getting close on time, and I always try to close this with a few in the future, and I want to get your opinion on this as well, Dom. Looking across all the sectors, right, like space, healthcare, anything you want to go to, doesn't matter. I wanted to ask you, like, thinking about the future, like maybe 2030 or something like that in the future, and with the AI shifting our focus towards different things right now, what do you think, and I want to, maybe even be as bold as like send a message to world leaders out there, like what should the public sector leaders, be that the president or, whatever, like agency leader, like what they should be thinking in terms of technology to prepare us for a better or, more improved future?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is the range of accessibility technology will enable. I think we know that there's a group of individuals in any society who are technologically savvy, but you now have this wide range of folks who, grew up maybe with early technology and folks who are, being handed a tablet, from day one. And how do you use technology to provide accessibility to the range of public good services that you have available in a way that is easy for people to use? I know I've done work with, can I use an LLM with a patient who's suffering cognitive decline and give them an interface that's valuable and useful for them, that they can understand and interact with the world effectively? So for me, the ability to really use technology to unlock access to the edge cases, if you will, of people who don't have access to technology, the underserved, that's a personal mission, and one I think that government officials should really think about, because it really will enable them to make a big impact on the broadest array of people on the planet.
Yeah, you said something to me that stuck with me, like this sector doesn't get to choose who their customer focus are going to be. It has to be everybody. And so I think that's why this is so powerful and important.
Yeah. That last mile, if you will, of individuals to reach is now within our grasp. And I'm excited about how we make that happen.
Serving the underserved, being able to reach everyone. So Dom, that is incredibly positive and hopeful message. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you coming on the AWS Pulse. Thanks for making this a fascinating talk. Thank you, everyone who's watched and joined us online. And if you have more questions, please keep sending them in. We'd love to be able to interact with you later. For Raphael and myself, Dom, thank you very much. And everyone, we'll see you next time on the AWS Pulse.